Today, we're going to do the Autotune deep dive, where I show you what it all means and how you can get the most out of Autotune. I'm going to play a song here by Drew Sirks called The Bitter End. It just came out. It's on Spotify. And Drew has been cool enough to let us use his song for an Autotune demo. So check it out.
I tend to lose my head these days. Really meant to warn you. I tend.
So the knob in the top left corner here is called the Retune Speed, and this is probably the most used setting. It's the one that we all reach for first, and it affects how fast or slow Autotune reacts as a note comes in. So what you just heard was the retune speed all the way at 0, so as fast as it can go. And you probably caught that Drew's voice sounded a bit robotic, kind of had like a T-Pain or a synthesized sound to it. And that's because Autotune's not letting any transitions go by. There's no glides, it's just note, 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 and it snaps to each one. So let's take another listen now that you know what that means.
I tend to lose my head these days. Really meant to warn you.
Okay, so if that's the effect you're going for, throw on Autotune, retune to 100%, leave everything else at 0, and you're good to go. If we pull this back a bit to about 70, we're going to get a much more natural tuning, a much smoother sound, because it's not snapping every little nuance. It's allowing the singer to glide and get to the note naturally, and it's not snapping each one. But what happens is when the singer lands on a note, the sustain of that note is where Autotune's going to clamp down and keep it in tune. So let's check that out. This is retune speed at 72.
I tend to lose my head these days. Really meant to warn you.
Okay, so we can hear how it's still nice and in tune, but there's none of that weird glitching in between each note because Autotune's just not working that fast. You can almost think of this as a wet-dry knob. It's not exactly how it's working. It's much more related to time and how quick it responds, but the faster you set it, the more extreme tuning effect you're going to get, and the slower you set it, the more subtle it's going to be. Now, most of us use Autotune like this, in auto mode, but Autotune does have a graphical editor. And we can use this to visually see what each of these parameters are doing. So to access that, you're going to just click on this little slider here up at the top in the center, switch that from auto to graph, and boom, we have a graphical editor. Now, I had imported some audio before, so I'm just going to clear this out, and I'll show you how to load audio in. In your DAW, you want to make sure that the clip you want to import is selected. Then next to track here, you're just going to click pitch and hit play.
I tend to lose my head these days. Really meant to warn you.
So what we're seeing here is the pitch curve, all these red lines, laid out across the piano roll. And it looks kind of similar to Melodyne. It's a little more clunky, but the same kind of concept where time is left to right and the pitch is up and down. So it's the piano keys turned on their side. I'm going to click this button called Make Curves. And what that's going to do is outline the pitch curve with an editable one that we can click and drag and manipulate a bit. Next to that is an option called Import Auto. And this is what we're going to use to visualize the settings that we're using on the auto page, because what that's going to do is what it says. It's going to import the settings we have set up on the auto page. So we'll flip back over there, and I'm going to change the retune speed back to as fast as it can go, back to 0. Let's go back to graphical editing, and now let's hit that Import Auto button. Boom. Let's do that again. Make curves. I'm going to zoom in a little bit to a note with some movement so we can really see what's going on. Let's look at this note right here where we have some glide. When I click Import Auto, it's going to snap. So all of that natural transition is gone, and it snaps each note right when they cross the 50% mark to the next note. So zoomed in here, we can see that on this note, on the D, there's a straight black line that runs left to right. And each note has one of those, a D sharp, an E, and this red line is our original pitch curve. So we can see that the original pitch curve right here was closest to a D. But once it crossed, like we can see here, is about right at 50%, it moves closer to the range of a D sharp. And Autotune, instead of following this red line and letting it get there gradually, Autotune snapped it right up. So with our retune speed at 0, as fast as it goes, when a note passes 51%, so closer to another note, rather than letting it get there gradually, Autotune says go from this note to that note with no time in between, just as fast as it can. And let's take one more listen there. We can actually see what's going on. We can see all those little snapping lines and see what they sound like.
I tend to lose my head these days. Really meant to warn you.
Okay, perfect example of why this sounds unnatural. Let's look at the vibrato here at the end of this note. So instead of this line being curved and moved between each note, it snaps up, snaps back to 0, snaps down, snaps back to 0, snaps up. So you could probably guess that that's not going to sound the most natural. That's going to sound kind of glitchy. And if that's the sound you want, mission accomplished. So let's click Make Curves. We're going to reset that line. We'll go back to the Auto page, and let's bring that retune speed back to 70. Go back to Graphical. We're going to zoom in a little bit, and we'll click Import Auto. So we can see that all of that weird jagged snapping is gone. It's pulling the notes closer, but it's not snapping them irregularly. It's letting glide happen. It's letting transition. It's letting natural singing occur. And then on some of these sustained notes, we can see this green line is closer to being in tune than the red line, but there are some irregularities. It allows for some natural movements. So let's jump down the line a little bit. Take a look at this phrase, and we can see that not a lot has really been changed. So let's go back over to the Auto page and try something in between. Let's try maybe 35. And we'll go over to Graphical. We'll hit Import Auto, and we can see that that line shifts even closer to being in tune while still allowing some glide and natural transition. So let's check out what it sounds like with the retune speed at 35.
I tend to lose my head these days. Really meant to warn you.
I tend to leave my retune speed between 120 for real subtle tuning that I'm hardly going to hear, and 30, where 30 is where it's going to really start pulling things in, but not get overly snapped to that pitch grid. So let's try this with another feature and get to know some of the other parameters on the main Auto-Tune window. I'm just going to hit Make Curves here to sort of reset the pitch line here. This will make curves back to the original sung performance. We'll flip over to the Auto window, and we're going to leave our retune speed at 0, right? Because we know what that's doing. I want it to kind of level everything out so we have a nice clean starting point to see what all these other things are doing. So let's look at FlexTune. I'm excited to deep dive into FlexTune in this way because honestly, I have turned the knob a whole bunch and I've never fully understood what it's doing. I've gotten it to sound good, and I've heard it make changes to the way it's tuning, but I've never fully understood what it's actually doing. So let's flip over to the Graphical page. We're going to import Auto so it levels everything out to the fastest retune speed, and let's find a nice held out sustained note. So let's go over to the very end here. So if we look at this note, we can see we've got a nice held out sustain, then we have a little snap here, little snap, little snap. So let's flip over to the Auto window, and FlexTune by default is set to 0. So this is kind of where it's not really doing anything. Let's move FlexTune to 50, which is that halfway mark. We'll go to Graphical, and let's hit Import Auto. Okay, so we've got some changes. What it seems to be doing is allowing some more deviation from the note before it snaps it into the next one. So let's take a listen with our FlexTune at 0, which is just going to be that quick snap tuning that we're used to hearing by now.
I tend to lose my head these days. Really meant to warn you.
Okay, and FlexTune at 50.
I tend to lose my head these days. Really meant to warn you.
So yeah, it starts to sound more natural, but I'm still not 100% sure what it's doing. Let's kick that up a little bit more. Let's try 100, flip to Graphical mode, Import Auto, and our pitch line seems to mirror the original sung performance almost identically. There's almost nothing happening. So maybe 100% is too much flex, and it's not actually tuning anything. So we'll go back to Auto, try a halfway point. Let's try like 75. Graphical, Import. And yeah, we can see that this line is held in place, but where this red line curves up, it allows it to curve up just a little bit less. And where this red line curves down, same thing. Allows it to curve down, but a little bit less. Holds this one in place, lets this curve happen, but less, and some natural gliding into that top note. So this one to me feels the most like an actual wet dry. Like how much deviation do we allow before we snap the note in place? Let's take a listen to what this sounds like. I'll flip to the Auto page so you can see what the settings are currently. We have retune speed as fast as it can go, and FlexTune at 75.
I tend to lose my head these days. Really meant to warn you.
So that sounds really good, really nice and in tune, but still kind of natural. It lets some of the natural movement across the note still happen, just a little bit less, a little more honed in, but not flattened out 100%. That sounds pretty nice. But I want to go deeper. I want to go under the hood and figure out what is FlexTune really doing. So I'm going to load in a sine wave. This is just going to be a sine wave that sweeps up from a couple of notes, nice and linear. So in theory, we can look at and analyze exactly what is happening under the hood. Okay, here's what we got. Just a straight sine wave that sweeps up a couple of notes. Okay, and we can see this line is linear. It just goes straight up the row here. There's no tuning applied currently, so that curve is allowed to just move gradually and linear. Let's go over to Auto. Retune is as fast as it goes, and FlexTune is at 0. Awesome. So I want to do this first because I want to know what happens when FlexTune is not doing anything, and then we can start to see the changes it makes as we increase that parameter. So we'll go to Graphical, click Import Auto, and we can see that that line that was linear and gradual is now jagged and snaps to each note. And the cool thing is we now know exactly when these changes happen. So these lines are exactly on their corresponding note. In this case, this is a C, C sharp, D, D sharp, all the way up. The space in between is the deviation between each note. So we can see if we follow this line, I'm guessing here a little bit just using my eyes, but this looks like it's exactly halfway. And when the note crosses that line, Autotune says, kick it up to the next one. And we can see that. Boom, kicks up, and it holds in place until this red line crosses 50%, and it's now closer to the next note, kicks it up in place. So with the retune speed as fast as it goes and FlexTune at 0, the pitch changes happen when a note crosses 50%, when it's halfway closer to the next note. So let's listen first. I'm just going to bypass Autotune. We can hear that sweep nice and linear. And with Autotune engaged, retune speed as fast as it goes, we can hear those glides in between. Now let's mess with FlexTune. Let's click back over to Auto, turn FlexTune on to about 50, and flip back over to Graphical, and let's click Import Auto. So those snapping points, which just before, with no FlexTune, were 100% either on this note or the next one, there was no transition, now have some transition. So it's allowed some of this curve to come back, and the point at which it starts to move seems to have changed. Right here is where the red line crosses 50%. But this note is not changing here, the green line. The note changes back here, where it seems that the red line, which again is our normal original curve, so if this was a singer, that would be what they sung. The green line is what Autotune is doing. I know it's a lot of different colors and lines to follow, but if we look at the red line, Autotune starts to move this note a lot earlier. It starts to move this note or allow it to jump to the next note when it crosses 25%. And now following this curve, it's letting it move on its own with a little bit of pitch correction because it doesn't just give up and say, okay, no more tuning. It's still holding it a little bit closer than it is up here, but at 25% off of the note C, it starts to let it move until we get right here, which is about 25% closest to a C sharp. So FlexTune takes these lanes, which used to be split evenly at 50% closest to a C, it's going to a C. If it's 51% or closer to a C sharp, it's going to a C sharp. And it takes those lanes and shrinks them. So now, for the singer to be locked into a C, they need to be within 25%. So it allows the singer to move around the note, and it's going to grab less than if FlexTune was turned off. And that's why we saw when we opened FlexTune up to 100%, that lane of snapping was so small that we weren't seeing any results. Okay, so let me play this for you with FlexTune at 50%. Our line and our curve, it's still split into notes. It's not linear the way that it was. If I bypass Autotune, we get this. Okay, there's no real difference between each note. It just moves in a straight line. If I turn that back on, we are snapping to notes, but it's not 100%, and there's no clicking or glitching between the notes. There's some glide and movement there. So if this was a singer, we can see how that would be cool to allow some more expression. Okay, so enough boring sine waves and science and numbers. Let's get back into music. So I want to talk about the Humanize parameter. We're going to leave our retune speed at 0. We'll take flex tune back to 0 because we just want to focus on Humanize. And again, let's just refresh our ears. So graphical mode, make curves, levels it back out to 0. Import auto, we can see we're getting that quick retune speed again. And let's hit play.
I tend to lose my head these days. Really meant to warn you.
Okay, nice and fast, glitchy, T-Pain, synthesizer, not what we're going for. Let's zoom in to this note at the end here. And we'll go back to auto and let's start messing with Humanize. Let's do it in stages. So let's go to about 30. And I'm going to zoom into some of these glitches. I'm most interested in what it does to the fast movements. That is really what makes it sound unnatural, especially a Humanize knob, right? If the goal is to make it more human, let's find the spots that make it sound the least human and see what's actually changing. So we'll click import auto. All right, look at that. These lines, if I hit undo, used to be very jagged and quick, and now import auto, they've got some glide and movement to them. They're not as snapped in at that pace. So it's similar to FlexTune. It allows more expression, but it doesn't seem to be based on closeness to the note. It's still snapping this note when it crosses this 50% mark. It didn't seem to change that. And we can actually see that pretty much right on the money here. This red line starts to move up. The green line holds in place until it passes 50%. But when it does, it doesn't snap it 100% to the next note. What it does is it glides to the next note, and it seems to be by whatever number we set on the Humanize knob. Let's flip over to auto and increase that a bit. Let's go 50. Okay, graphical, let's make curves, import auto. Similar results. Not a lot of changes from 30 to 50. Let's try 100. Let's just kick it up all the way. Go back to graphical, import. Yeah, not a lot of changes there. So still not seeing a whole lot of difference there with the Humanize knob kicked up all the way from what we were seeing at even just 35%. But we did see a difference from when it was completely turned off. A lot of this could be that the retune speed is also still set as fast as it can go. It's where we start to combine these things that we can get a nice in-tune vocal, catching all the notes along the way, but still letting it sound nice and natural. So let's hear what this sounds like. Humanize, 100%, retune speed, 30.
Tend to lose my head these days. Really meant to warn you.
Cool, I'm digging that. Sounds natural. It's catching the small notes along the way. Now, we know if we kick FlexTune up to 50%, that the range that it's going to catch each note shrinks by about 50%. We have to be 50% closer to the actual note. So in theory, it makes it harder for the singer to be tuned, right? Because they have to be closer before Autotune starts to tune it. So let's try this at about 30, and we'll watch our indicator here to see what's actually happening.
I tend to lose my head these days.
Now, if I pull FlexTune further away,
I tend.
and we look at the change here, where it goes from blue for Autotune pulling a note higher, and orange if Autotune's pulling a note lower, FlexTune at 100, that doesn't move at all.
Tend to lose my head these days. Really meant.
Okay, and it's when I pull FlexTune down that we start to see it tune again. So what it does is it shrinks the window of closeness that a singer needs to be before Autotune starts to work. So 100% FlexTune seems to turn it off. I'm going to say 30, nice sweet spot, leave a little bit of room for deviation. Let's see what that sounds like.
I tend to lose my head these days. Really meant to warn you.
Okay, so hopefully that clears up what some of these different knobs and parameters are doing. I know especially with FlexTune. I had no idea what that was really doing. I was just turning a knob until it sounded better. But now that I know what it's doing, I can make better choices, especially when I want to use my ears and not my eyes. So there's a couple of other settings on this main page that we can tweak to get Autotune working better for us and get better results. Starting with input type, and this is where we can select different vocal ranges. We have soprano, alto, tenor, somebody with a lower voice. If it's an instrument like a guitar or a monophonic keyboard sound, or a bass guitar, a bass instrument. I've used Autotune plenty of times on bass guitar, and it works really well, especially with a bass where the intonation might not be so great. If you tell Autotune what it's listening to, it's going to have different algorithms to better figure out and better predict what it's supposed to do with those notes. So in this case, we'll leave it at alto and tenor. Next, we're going to tell Autotune what key we're in, and by default, it's going to be the key of C in the chromatic scale. Now, my song happens to be the key of C, so I'm just going to leave that there, but you can select whatever key your song is in. Then you want to select the scale. So I'm in C major, so what I could do is click this drop-down, click major, and it's going to gray out my keyboard. The keyboard down here is where you can manually tell Autotune, tune to these notes, exclude these notes. And basically, you take 12 notes down to 7 potential candidates, and it does a much better job of guessing where it's supposed to go. The problem here is that I can no longer manually edit the keyboard. So if I'm in the key of C, but there's a cool chord change later in the bridge for a measure or two, and the singer goes to a note that's technically not in the key of C, Autotune's going to correct that to be within the key of C, effectively tuning that note to the wrong one. So we want to be able to still use this keyboard to say, well, I know it's the key of C, but later in the bridge, he's going to sing F sharp, right, which is not in the key of C. So I'm going to set this back to chromatic, and we're going to go over here to the advanced option, and we'll click advanced, and this will open up a whole bunch of other parameters. There's a whole create vibrato section that I've literally never used, so we're going to skip over that for now. But what I want to focus on is right down here where it says set major, set minor, set all. Okay, so I said before my key is C major, so I can click set major, and it's going to eliminate all of the sharps and flats because the key of C only uses the natural keys. It's C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. So no sharps, no flats. And now if I hit play,
I tend to lose my head these days, really meant to warn you.
okay, so it's only latching to notes within the key of C. And that's super helpful because all those in-between notes are technically out of key, but it creates a lot more potential options, and a singer might be a little bit close to a C sharp, but not all the way close to a D. So by eliminating some of those in-between notes, Autotune has a much better chance at guessing correctly. Now, like the example I said earlier, if I want to say it's in the key of C, but he's going to sing an F sharp, I can click F sharp, and that note goes from grayed out to black. And I'll do it in a couple of octaves in case. But now, if the singer was to sing an F sharp, Autotune knows include that note in the key, and if he sings that note, tune it. Okay, so by now we should have a much better understanding of what's going on under the hood when it comes to Autotune. It's a pretty crazy tool, to be honest. There's so many different features and parameters to play with, and the speeds of this one, how does it affect that one? So now it's up to you to get creative. Find those speeds that work best for the genre you're in, the effect you're going for, what your singer will allow you to do. I mean, I've tuned vocals where I'm like, this sounds great, nice and in tune, nice and subtle. And the singer's like, dude, what have you done? My voice sounds like a robot. And so, they've got opinions too. You've got to make sure that your singer likes the way it sounds. And all of that can be adjusted and manipulated until everybody's happy. So play around with it, have fun. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for sticking with me. Consider subscribing so that you can hear about the next video, and I'll see you there.